Keith here is managing partner at LRVHealth and was part of the Jason task force that led to Argonaut, right? And Argonaut led to all these wonderful IGs, right? More or less.
They are fantastic.
So what Keith is going to talk about is like technology has maybe so far not yet changed healthcare. Will it change with AI, right?
Correct.
The floor is yours.
All right, thanks guys. Thank you. All right, I get to do the same thing. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
They at least pumped you up. So I'll start with a couple of ground rules. One is I'm going to stick with this theme of pessimism to optimism. I'm going to start a little pessimistic. You have to bear with me. Second is, you can tell by my last name, I'm a little Italian. I use my hands. That's a ground rule, and I have to walk, and I have to talk, and I get quite passionate, and I apologize for all of it in advance. So let's start with some data. I like to start all presentations kind of framing. Everybody in this room has been instrumental, and not only for the last 10 years, and previous that with HL7, but FIRE, but how do you pan back when we have so much work down in the weeds and think about what's actually happening in the healthcare sector? And I know we have people just in the US and non-US in the room, obviously. And you think about expenditures, and everybody talks about healthcare expenditures for the US, and we all know it's 20% of GDP. But the little known fact, non-US, when you start looking at England, you start looking at Germany, you start looking at France, you look at the UK, they're all at 10% of GDP and rising, and those slopes are insane. I think that's the punchline in every single thing that all of us have been doing. I've been doing this for 22 years. I have dedicated my life, like you all, to trying to fundamentally transform healthcare through digitization. I will interchangeably talk about digital health and healthcare IT. I have the legacy of having an HIT asset, which is all I used to call it back when I started. But those slopes, when I started 22 years ago, I would have never thought, and there's many reasons for those slopes as we all know, but I would have thought technology would have started flattening some of those curves. And people who are interested and don't know, on the top right of that, Our World is Data is a fantastic resource for visualization of many different aspects of public health and general health data out on the web. So pop quiz time, we got to be a little interactive. It's morning, hopefully people had coffee. First of all, what do people think this chart represents? Greater than 40 billion of public funding in the US. What program was this and when did it start? I'll give you the program. It was Meaningful Use.
Oh, yeah.
When was Meaningful Use passed as part of the HITECH Act? Anybody know? 2009, hold 2011 for a second. So 2009 it was passed. 2011, your point, is when these incentives went into place with stage one. So if you step back and you think about all the work that we do, and you think about the first push of real digitization, and for those of us who have studied a little bit of the history on the healthcare IT side, there was many. Northrop used to be involved in healthcare IT. American Express used to be involved in healthcare IT back decades upon decades ago, but it never moved the needle. The first time we ever moved the needle with digitization in this country, in the US, is with Meaningful Use, with incentives flowing in 2011. Keep that date in mind, it's 2024. But 2011, anchor that in your mind for a few slides. That money flew from the public sector first, and what do you think followed from the public sector? Private money. So now the cavalry came behind it, and the cavalry came behind it not just in the US, but also internationally. If you look at these numbers, these are pretty sizable numbers if you start going back to the GDP comparison about what flew in from the private sector overall into the actual digitization and incentive and capitalistic kind of position in these various markets. Some of these obviously are government-led health systems, and others are more free market with some regulatory overlay like we see in the US and other markets. To just come back into the US, many people have probably seen this slide, and Rock Health does a very nice job of actually capturing digital health investment. So this data, to be 100% clear, has no biotech numbers in it. It has no private equity and healthcare in it. This is 100% healthcare IT investing de novo dollars. And what do you see there? From 2013 up into the end of 2023, the private sector in the US has infused $100 billion into digital health. So you would think, right? So 10 years of fire, but now we at, over 10 years, maybe almost a decade and a half we're getting to of public infusion, private infusion. We should have ROI coming out from everywhere. How many people think we see a lot of tangible ROI today in the healthcare sector? Raise your hands. Everybody shaking their head. Everybody shaking their head. We've all put our lives to this. Everybody shaking their head. Okay. So I ask a lot of people this question. I talk to executives at health systems. I talk to executives at payers. But I just thought this week when Ward told me to come up, I was like, well, maybe I'll ask just Perplexity. It seems like a pretty good tool. It seems like one of the best search engines out on the marketplace today with multiple LLMs tied into it. I was like, they must have a good point of view. So I think this is interesting. I just said really simply, has there been true ROI in healthcare technology investments? And I'm not going to read any slide except this one, if I can read it. But my favorite couple of points are many healthcare executives report that their organizations have not seen a clear ROI from digital health technology investments, 71% in that survey. So that probably is about what I saw shaking the heads in the room. Second is, it's a very complex thing to measure. And then third, which I think is the other thing to keep in your head as I keep going through on this, is it could take 5 to 10 years to realize any ROI when it comes to actually doing anything with technology in healthcare, including electronic health records. So I was giggling when these guys were talking about we solved healthcare. That was a good one. I always use the example that I still can't figure out how you can plug in Tylenol into an EHR database the same way historically across every incident of Epic across this country. We still don't do this today, which is unbelievable to me. But that's how we've actually set up the system. So there's a lot of complexity, and nobody in the crowd better than you all to know about the complexity at the detail level of this. So it takes many, many moons. Oops, my bad. Jumped ahead. So not only do we have long timelines to implement, but we live in a very highly regulatory environment. This is a great picture. I found it actually this week when I was putting this together. I chuckled when I found it. I mean, big old bad in this town, by the way, headquarters, United Optum, cannot even spin up a fast digital business and get huge ROI. Right? So I don't know how many people know this, but Optum shut down their telehealth business about 2.5 months ago, their direct telehealth business. And so that tells you something. I don't know how many people know that United Health and Optum actually produce $23 billion in free cash flow a year. So that means they make free profits encumbered by all their expenses, everything else. They can take $23 billion and go put it in the bank and make more money. And they can't fast cycle a lot of this stuff as well. And I think it's a really important thing to think about when you have multiple large multinational corporations, multiple venture capitalists like myself and others, multiple incumbent players, standard developers, implementers, developers, hands-on keyboard people, and we have not produced tangible ROI in the better part of the last decade and a half with over $150 billion, if not more, invested into the category. Endpoint on pessimism. I told you I'd bring you down for a second. So, let's switch for a second and think about maybe a different lens to think about this problem overall. And let's use a parallel here. And I've used this parallel a lot in the last decade in various talks because I think it's the best parallel that continues to actually be relevant. How many people in the room know Sabre in the travel industry? All right, here comes this is like serious pop quiz time. Meaningful use was like a layup. And you won that. This table won that part. So when was Sabre developed and by who? What year? Nope. Think later. Later than the 70s. The ripe year of 1960. Who was it built with? It was two partners. It was a travel partner and a computing partner. Who do you think that was back in the 60s? All right, IBM was one. Who was the other? Who's the travel partner? Sorry? American Airlines. So American Airlines, IBM, spent a ton of money to get rid of a manual booking system to create a DOS-based booking system in 1960. Here's the bonus question. How many transactions did Sabre, which has been modernized, as you can imagine, a few of you probably been involved in modernization stacks, how many transactions, booking transactions, did Sabre handle last year? 100 million. So think about that. That is a technology that was developed on a very straight line transactional thing. I need to book an airline ticket. Think about on the other side of that chart, in the health record side, health records were like, I've got a bill. Regardless of us thinking about CPOE back in the day and order entry and all, ultimately it was like, I need a mechanism to actually bill the government or private payer to do that. And most of that work was incented when? Everybody should say this now. Where were we? Say it again. This table won last time. 2011. So 1960, 2011. So the optimistic side of me as I walk up the stack of this chart is that we've just got started. And I think that is what's lost in so many of the healthcare circles at the government level, at the venture level, at the incumbent level. Because when you start thinking about what actually started happening in travel, and the middle stack starts talking about the enablers, as all of you are very familiar with, how do you build a set of enablers to be able to move up that stack? And so if you think about Sabre is the baseline booking engine, and I don't care if it's DOS, I don't care if it's internet enabled, I don't care what it is. But it is technologically handling a transaction at high process throughput, no different than Epic and other EHRs are doing on the core elements of what we do in healthcare. If you move up that stack, which you can see in the early days, it was client servers, remote access, but as we moved up into the internet, what happened in travel, everybody could book their own tickets through the airline sites. We still do that today. Ironically, what happened in the airline, which I find fascinating, is there should be a loop on that chart, is we all booked on the airline sites and we're like, well, that sucks because I only see one flight. And then I actually happened to be one of the early days developers of Orbitz back in the day when I lived out in the Bay Area. And Orbitz, Expedia, and Kayak were like, well, we're going to aggregate price points. And everybody flew to Orbitz, Expedia, and then ultimately Kayak aggregated the aggregators. But ironically, how many people go on those today? Most people still book on the airline sites, right? I know I do. I go to Google Flights first, I find out the price point, then I go to American Airlines and I book the ticket, right? That's what I do. I don't know if you do, that's what I do. So ironically, there's this weird loop going on, but the internet created that, and then the cloud and mobile enabled all of us to do that. The other bonus question I didn't tell you about Sabre is guess how long it took from 1960 to what date to get to the actual end travel agent end users? 16 years. So they developed it with IBM and for internal purposes, and then they didn't get it out to the travel agents for 16 years. And so again, you're thinking about these cycles of what's actually happening, and then look at the travel industry. My cute little star on the left side depicts, in my opinion, where that industry is at on the stack. So if you think about agents, and you think about the next evolution of where LLMs are going in terms of agents, that's where the travel agency is going because that infrastructure is so mature. So when we pick up the next set of capabilities in travel, you will not have to go to Google Flights. You will not have to go to American Airlines. You will have an agent on your phone that says, book me the best flight to Minneapolis because I have to go speak at DevDays. And that will get done for you without all those rotating clicks and all that stuff. That is actually happening in real time for people that are following the travel industry as we speak. All sorts of issues getting there. I'm not going to bring up a lot of the issues with Gen AI today. I'm sure you have a bunch of breakout sessions that talk about all the mechanical problems there. And it's, again, another journey. But that is really happening. And Transformers, the paper back in 2017 that started all that with Google DeepMind, that's what unlocked this next evolution of productivity on that side. Now to loop back over to the right on EHRs, like, let's just be really intellectually honest with ourselves. We're like way down the stack. I mean, you guys have been at FIRE for 10 years. It's not complete, right? Right? Last time I looked at all the resource classes, I didn't think they were complete. They're not, right? I mean, HL7's been around for a long period of time. It can do a bunch of really incredible things, mostly with ADT. But like you just start getting into the details of this stuff, and it's really, really early days. And then you start imagining what can happen as you do what you do with FIRE. Think about what you all have done, even though I just said it's not complete. But what you've been able to enable in this country is incredible, let alone the world. But now what happens with Transformers in this space? And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. What happens with TEFCA, which I left off this space, which I shouldn't have, but if you put TEFCA on there as the next set of enablers, and that actually starts playing out, Mickey Tripathi happens to be a very good friend of mine, and understanding and talking to him about what's actually going to take place there if we actually realize that, we're going to unlock the next set of value creations in this country that we haven't seen yet. And then I put at the top of that stack, I don't know what's next, after we get to this next kind of second wave. But I think it's important to pan back on the pessimism, because I'm a great pessimist by nature, that I think we have accomplished a lot, and I think we have a lot ahead of us that's going to be incredible. And I always try to look at these other industry examples and say, wow, look what they've done. Look at the pattern of what we can do all that. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. I want to have a little bit of optimism. Maybe we should bring Gino back up, and he can pump y'all up. So just a few thoughts as we enter 2.0. And this is a little bit of our view after spending about 2+ years sort of way in the depths with Microsoft and a number of other folks on the LLM side. Everybody in this room knows this, but this is where optimism really sits. I mean, how many times, I've been in informatics for 22 years. I can't tell you how many companies in my current firm, LRV, come in and tell me they have the best thing since sliced bread when it comes to data extraction, data cleansing. We're going to integrate payer and provider claims. We don't have a universal ID. We don't have provenance. We don't have governance. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been in these cycles. This is the first time in my 22+ year career in healthcare that I'm actually excited. I actually think all the problems that we've been talking about, albeit all the issues and where we are right now with the current state of Gen AI, we're going to move into a different category where everybody of what they've been saying for the past 10 years in informatics, you're actually going to start realizing. And you start thinking about the unstructured nature of data in healthcare, which we all know is about 80%. These are uniquely suited to deal with this problem. I can tell you that we've looked at 60 to 80 LLM healthcare-centric companies in the last 8 months, and almost every single one of them functionally is doing exactly the same technical functional thing. And that gives me interest in terms of saying, wow, we are going to get to something here around that front. Secondly, waste is everywhere. And LLMs, I'll talk about in a second, while I don't get too excited today about what we can do clinically and clinical decision support, I get very excited about what we can do administratively and operationally. And that's what we're starting to see play out in the marketplace. And then to take the Microsoft words around copilots, if we truly can put a set of copilots in people's hands that starts bringing down burnout on not just doctors, not just nurses, but everybody that works in healthcare is burned out, at least in this country. I can't speak for other countries. They are fried. And so if we can start really, that's where, in my opinion, real ROI will come from technology enablement. So is the technology overhyped? We don't think so. So I try to put this as base case, classic venture people, base case, upside case. Base case, we get better search functionality. We get better search, hunt, and peck. We get rid of a lot of hunting and pecking exercises and get to better unstructured data and all data is our base case. So that's a good day for everybody in this room. That's like a good day. Like even if that's all that happens, everything goes nuts, hallucinations go nuts, things go nuts, but at least we can get the data better. The upside case, which we couldn't have timed this event better than yesterday's Apple event, is that everything goes to the edge like networking. So if everybody thinks about back in the day with Sun Microsystems, everybody in the network craze, everything was about getting the network to the edge. Well, what is everybody trying to do right now? The next phase of what's going to happen with LLM development, they're trying to get LLMs to the edge. And so if you actually start thinking about what I'll just use their words, Apple intelligence, which scares the hell out of me, by the way. If you actually start thinking about what Microsoft is doing, what Apple is doing, what Google is doing, they are pushing LLM processing and computation into every one of our pockets, which should really scare everybody, by the way. It scares the living bejesus out of me, like to the point where I got to figure out a kill switch on the next set of devices, because it's going to be great for our ability in healthcare to start doing different things in the workflow. It will be horrible for privacy for all of us. It'll be a godsend for every advertiser that's been around this world for many, many moons. And so ultimately, I think it will be good, but I am cautious about the impact to our day-to-day lives with all of this. Microsoft's already shipping computers with LLM compute processing on the back end of it in terms of connectivity tissue. The Apple intelligence thing, I don't know if many people read it yesterday or looked at it. It's really kludgy. Like there's a Siri agent that's going to get rebuilt, and then it's going to query and process whether it has to go out to OpenAI or not because it's a sophisticated ChatGPT query. It's going to be kludgy for a while, in my opinion, but it also means that your data is going to go everywhere, which is the part that scares me. Because you got too many people doing way too much development in too many different pathways right now. But that is the upside case, where it really truly becomes the OS and the computing and the function changes completely over time. And ultimately, timing and technological changes and adoption need to be carefully watched. And I'll just end with this, which is our mindset and all of this, and I'm still talking about Gen AI, and I'm talking about the optimism of what I think the next wave of solutions this will bring, is think about this as crawl, walk, run, wait for it, over the next decade. Not next year, not 2 years, not 3 years, next decade. And I think that is the real punchline in a lot of this technology development to end on, is not only is this going to come into administrative, operational, and clinical workflows over time, but there's a set of governance principles that do not exist in healthcare today that have to exist for this to get right, especially in clinical and clinical decision support. Clinical decision support, if Gen AI starts getting in there and we start dealing with some of the issues associated with it, we have to have IRB-like setups for governance. And that is just not where we are. So I'll end with a little bit of pessimism. But ultimately, thank you for your time. Hopefully that was a little bit enlightening, and I wish you the best for the next couple of days. Thank you.